The future of work isn't about shareholder value, technology, metrics, or automation. It's about being human and putting people first through actionable love. Welcome to the Love in Action podcast, where we hold deep conversations with extraordinary people to help you grow as a leader and expand your business. Here's your host, Marcel Schwantes.
Hey, glad you are here. Thanks for choosing to spend time with us. We are grateful. And we would be even more grateful if you could share this episode on social media and help us get to our goal of 1 million downloads. So, hey, if you're a longtime listener, you know we like to talk about company culture here on the show. And if you're still new to the idea or you are not fully convinced of the business impact of a great culture, maybe this episode is going to help you. Because I firmly believe that a great work culture is your competitive advantage. It's people coming to work and living their values. And when that happens consistently over time, folks, it becomes the reason that they go the extra mile. For a customer, they go the extra mile on their performance, on helping others. So company culture is how you increase your employees' performance. You don't think that makes an impact on your business goals? You better believe it. So there's a company out there that is in the business of helping other businesses develop great work cultures. It's a company I highly admire. I've been following them for years. I've written numerous articles on my Inc. magazine column highlighting their reports and their research on anything culture and leadership and employee engagement. And I speak of Achievers. Achievers builds sustainable, data-driven success for individuals and organizations all around the world. They are the always-on employee recognition and voice solutions leader in their industry. So they bring science-backed behavioral change by putting people at the heart of employee experience. So that ensures that everyone gets the continuous recognition, support, and coaching people need to succeed. And that's the business they're in. Achievers is also a great company. They've been ranked first place in customer satisfaction ratings, and they've received multiple employer awards, including top 50 best workplaces in Canada, best workplaces for women, and best workplaces for inclusion. So obviously, this is a brand I stand behind, and it closely aligns with the Love in Action message. But also, I look to these fine folks to inform my own work as a leadership coach and advisor and consultant. So I thought I'd invite one of the most respected individuals from that company that I have covered in many of my articles. And that is the one and only Dr. Natalie Baumgartner. Dr. Baumgartner is an engagement and culture thought leader and evangelist. She has spent her career translating engagement and culture research into SaaS-based software, helping organizations to achieve high performance. She holds a dual role as Chief Workforce Scientist at Achievers and partner at Contemporary Leadership Advisors. She holds a PhD in clinical psychology with a specialization in strengths-based psychology. You'll find her writings in places like Forbes and the Harvard Business Review, and she's also a popular speaker, including a TED Talk that she delivered on the importance of culture fit. And she is here, and she now joins us. Dr. Nat, welcome to the Love in Action podcast.
Thank you so much, Marcel. I appreciate that lovely introduction, and the admiration is mutual. I can assure you, we are fellow culture nerds, is how I refer
Yes.
to myself. So I feel confident in referring to you that way as well.
I appreciate that, and I know that we're going to nerd out on this
We are.
conversation. So we start like this. You ready?
Ready.
What's your story?
Right. So I give you the quick and dirty, right? So as you mentioned, I'm a clinical psychologist. So my PhD is in clinical psychology. I love studying what helps people thrive. So that's the focus on strengths. And so I quickly realized that rather than focus on clinical work as in terms of treatment, I wanted to be out and doing more preventative work. And so that led me to be a consultant, working in the first decade of my career, working with senior leaders and executives and boards of directors on organizational challenges. And I gravitated towards culture because I saw, this is I'm going to date myself, 20 some odd years ago, but I saw very quickly how much culture impacted business performance, bottom line business performance, and how little it was actively managed in a data-driven way. So fast forward, I had the opportunity, because I live in Boulder, Colorado, where half the people are entrepreneurs. I had the opportunity to join a couple of serial entrepreneurs to co-found a software company called Roundpeg, where we measured and managed organizational culture, just like you bring measurement and management to any other aspect of business, financials, HR. We brought that measurement and management to culture. So we grew that. So I had the experience of being a founder, and really that's where my love of thought leadership launched, early 2000s. And that company, Roundpeg, was acquired by Achievers. So Achievers, the long history of having a deep mission of changing the way the world works. And so they knew that they needed to expand and include other facets of employee success beyond recognition alone. And so they acquired Roundpeg, and I came on as to really help expand their position as thought leaders in the business arena. And so for the last 7, almost 8 years, I've been with Achievers doing that work. Launched the Achievers Workforce Institute, which is our research institute that sits inside Achievers and conducts research to inform our technology and support our clients and making the world a better place. And most recently, the very end of that story is I had the great opportunity to help establish a strategic partnership between Contemporary Leadership Advisors, a New York City-based boutique consulting firm, and Achievers, so that we now have a full solution set to offer both clientele, services, and technology with one mission to change the way the world works.
That's fantastic. And speaking of Achievers Workforce Institute and geeking out, every time you pump out those reports, I'm all over it. And I just love how you guys piece together the data and then back it up with action. I mean, it's fantastic. So I want to frame this discussion around one of those reports that came out recently that you published. The title of it is The Foundations of Manager Effectiveness. And there's tons of great information there that I feel our listeners need to know, as so many of them are in high-level, leadership roles, HR roles, et cetera, listening. And because we want to give them the tools they need to succeed to shape their own, hopefully, great work culture, right? So give us kind of that 30,000-foot level, maybe view or a summary of this report.
Yes, and I have that same deep desire, Marcel, to really help organizations empower and support managers in creating a great experience for their people. This report at a high level gathered information and input from thousands of both employees and HR leaders. And so we're always and around the globe, and we're always looking at those two sets of data so that we can understand what's happening on a particular topic from those different vantage points. And oftentimes we have very different insights that we glean from that approach. And what we found is that the model that we put together some years ago now at the Achievers Workforce Institute regarding the factors that really help managers deliver the experience that employees most need, and that's contact recognition, coaching, and development. Those factors, we dove in to really evaluate, is that what employees need? Is that, do managers feel equipped to provide it? Where are the gaps? And this report was one of those that was so chock full of fascinating and really powerful results and insights, some that were incredibly surprising to us, even who've been sort of stewing in this world in this kind of on these topics for a while. It was very eye-opening in terms of where managers are thriving and where they're struggling, and how employees are feeling about all of the above.
Yeah, yeah. So the bulk of this report, and I love it because it's so practical. It points people to manager effectiveness in today's workplace. So before we dive into that stuff, I was really surprised by this stat. Only 28% of employees would recommend their manager to others. And I'm thinking, I mean, Gallup has put out their engagement studies for the last 40 years, and engagement sits around 30 to 33% of workers are engaged, at least in the US, much lower around the world. But how does this compare to years past? 20% seems pretty low to me. I mean, has it gone down even further?
It's, both engagement and, so this is manager, Net Promoter Score, manager, MNPS, is would you recommend your manager to others? That's that measuring stick. Those stats have been challenged for a long time. And I think there was actually a blip up during the pandemic, really surprisingly. So that, there's been consistency in the challenge for many years. There was a tick up during the pandemic in terms of the extent to which employees felt like they would recommend their managers and felt supported by their managers. And what we don't know to be perfectly true, but our hypothesis based on deeper analyses that we did following that is that employees during the pandemic had more contact, in a way, more direct contact, and so got a lot of those needs met that we're going to talk about today through their managers more consistently, because managers had to be really intentional about connecting with their people, meeting with their people. You couldn't say, like, walk by someone's desk and say, well, I know we're supposed to meet right now, but I have to run and do something else. Can we meet later? And then it never happens. Well intended, but failure to deliver. During the pandemic, we were on Zoom, constantly, and that was the only way that people could connect. And so that was a blip up, but we've really reverted back to pre-pandemic numbers. And unfortunately, it's not an unusual statistic. It is an ongoing significant challenge in the business arena.
Yeah. Okay. So before we get into manager effectiveness, I'm also interested in knowing what factors make managers ineffective and why this is happening.
Yeah. So, I mean, the factors that make managers effective, probably not surprisingly, are the same factors that make managers ineffective in a way. There's certain things managers we know need to do. And we'll talk about those in a moment. But to your question, Marcel, one of the things that we're realizing is, and this research really put a fine point on it, is that managers aren't getting the training, the support, the scaffolding that they need to deliver these really critical aspects or critical factors that employees need to receive. So we're going to, we'll talk a little bit about those factors, but 1 in 5 managers reported they had never received manager training inside their organizations. And that's not new news, but we haven't been able to put a number on it like we just did in this report. And that's really shocking, right? So you think about it, and people are promoted, they're put into a manager position, they're not given any additional training around, what it means to shift from being an individual contributor to a manager of people. And yet then the expectation is that they will provide a great experience. Only 29% of managers reported that they believe their company supports them to be a better people leader. So that's right, less than a third. And then another factor that weighs into all of this is that the vast majority of managers say they're not clear on how their effectiveness is being measured and managed by their organization. So they don't know the measuring stick, what it means to be a great manager. They're not giving the tools and the resources to become a great manager. And they don't feel like they're getting the support they need. And so I think that we're in a crisis in terms of supporting our managers to deliver.
Yeah. I know this deviates just a little bit from the path we're taking, but I'm so curious. So I'm going to ask it, okay? Because to me, I've seen this happen to my own clients. They promote individual contributors to management roles who are really not people leaders, or, what you and I would consider people leaders, some of the things that we're going to talk about here in a minute. And then to me, I think what happens is those managers then move up the ranks And then they're promoting the same people that reflect their own versions of what managers should be. And so to me, then that's what's happening is we're not putting the right people leaders into management roles.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would just say, slightly shift that a bit to say that I think some of the people that were so absolutely inside organizations, it's very common that an organization will take someone who's a great individual contributor in their arena. And their specialty and promote them. It's like, oh, now you get to be a manager, which could have little to or nothing to do with how well they did in that particular, function. But on top of it, that lack of supporting, and I'm a believer in that the vast majority of us, like 99% of us, wake up and when we go to work, we want to do a good job, right? Managers don't wake up and say, I just want to disempower my people today, right? Like, no, people don't do that. That is not human nature. However, if we don't give them the resources and the support that they need, then we're setting these managers up for a failure. And then to your point, Marcel, they're not, delivering, and then they don't know how to, do the same for the people beneath them that they promote. And so we have a systemic issue inside organizations now that we're not using the right criteria to promote people to managers. We're not helping educate and support them. We're not empowering them. And what is happening is we're starting to measure their effectiveness, but it's really not fair that we're measuring their effectiveness without also empowering them. So,
yeah. All right. Manager effectiveness. So when we hear that term, we can assume lots of different things, right? Some may think it's about strategy and driving for results. And that's certainly part of management, all those things. But in your view, what specific drivers make managers effective?
Well, so when our research, what we at the Achievers Workforce Institute, what we looked at specifically is what do employees need from their managers? So you made a great point just now, Marcel, that we know managers, I often say, they're the meat in the sandwich, right? They have two sets of constituents. They need to deliver to their boss, deliver results to the organization, and they need to support, develop, nurture the people beneath them in order to achieve those results. Yeah. So in organizations, we see typically, more clarity on like, okay, what do you need to deliver above, to the folks above you, far less focus on how do you support the people beneath you on your team so that you can deliver. The 4 factors that we identified after a tremendous amount of both academic and business research over a couple of years that we identified as the most important factors managers need to deliver to their people are meaningful contact. That means, one-on-ones, but not just one-on-ones where we're going through the checklist, but regular, meaningful meetings where we're talking about struggles the individual is having, how to manage through issues, both in terms of development, but also in terms of their role, what they're trying to deliver, and so on. Second is coaching, and we purposely differentiate that from feedback. Feedback is like a one-way street. I'm giving you feedback. Coaching should be an interactive, two-way process, and we need to help managers understand how to coach their people. One does not necessarily need a certificate or a degree in coaching to do effective coaching with our direct reports. But we do need to know a few simple rules or guidelines about how to provide meaningful coaching where the employee leaves saying, I got a lot out of that. Development, everyone needs to know what their development track looks like. We're moved away from these like in-depth, several page long development plans. And the best in class thinking today is, and our rule of thumb is, typically 2 to 3 development goals. We're looking at a personal goal, a professional goal, and sometimes a third goal that we look at on a quarterly basis, right? So, and we can measure against that. And then last is recognition. Recognition is the superpower tool when it comes to manager effectiveness. Anything you point recognition at, it amplifies. So if you're pointing that recognition at the good things that your team members are doing, you see tremendous results.
Yeah. So I know that Achievers is highly focused on recognition and then how to praise people effectively. That's one of the things I love about you guys is that recognition piece. So walk us through maybe some recognition best practices that managers should be aware of? Maybe it's different now post-pandemic than before. I don't know. What would you say?
Yeah, I love that you asked that part too, Marcel, because so we have best practices with recognition, and then I'll come back to the pandemic question. So the best practice is that every employee should be recognized by their manager at least once a month. And what we know is that if we elevate that and we say, what happens when employees are recognized even more often, we see that employees recognized weekly by their managers, and that can be in a platform, that can be ad hoc, simply calling someone up, walking by their desk, texting them, sending a Teams message. When it happens once a week, those employees are 10 times more likely to recommend their managers. So that MNPS score, and it like skyrockets. So if you say like, okay, my man, like the what's in it for me,
yeah,
that's not the end all be all, but it's actually a good measure of that employee feels really well cared for. And so recognition is one of the quickest, easiest, least expensive ways to provide that, experience of belonging and engagement for employees. And so it's critical. What the best practice is that recognitions should be real time. So you water down the impact if you see something and then you recognize it 3 weeks later. So don't, be a manager that waits till the end of the month and then sends out a bunch of recognitions. It doesn't have the same effect. But real-time recognition that is about that person specifically, so it's personal. It's about something they did, so something specific they did. So Marcel, thank you so much for inviting me to this podcast. It was so meaningful to have a chat with you after all this time, live and in person, that we've worked together. And then you say the last piece is the impact it had on you. And it just fueled me up for my day and made me even more excited to talk about belonging and recognition. So thank you so much. That's it. Personal, specific, and the impact it had. And do, as often as possible. There's no such thing as too much recognition as long as it's meaningful.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, I want to hone in on another of your 4 pillars, and that's professional development. So back in the old days, you thought of professional development as basically putting butts in seats at a seminar, right? And now it's with technology, things have changed. And then I also look at the newest generation, Gen Z, coming into the workforce, have much different expectations than my generation. So, they want relationships and purpose and meaning, et cetera. So I'm thinking, well, how does that impact professional development now? So this can be really hard for managers to master if you don't have the proper understanding of what it is, right? So how can managers become, pros at professional development?
Yes, and it is the number one area that managers report that they want more training in. So your point is very well taken. What we've learned about professional development is that less is more. So we meaning the business arena, got into a lot of trouble over the years, over the decades, trying to create these personal development programs and plans that were so labor intensive, so in depth, and that they just sat on the desk, and then managers didn't know how to follow up on them, so they needed HR's help to develop them, and then they had to figure out how to follow up on them. And so we think that development needs to be very simple. And if we keep things simple, less is more. If managers are doing a little bit, but it's really meaningful in terms of development for each of their team members, that impact goes a long way. So we focus on, as I mentioned a moment ago, 1 or 2 or 3 at the most development goals that are very measurable and that they're identified on a quarterly basis. So they're achievable in a short term. So you may say, well, I want to be a better public speaker. Great, that's a long-term goal. What's your goal for this quarter? I want to get up in front of my team and provide a presentation. Okay, so let's work on that. So when we meet as your manager at our one-on-ones, I'm going to say, how's that goal going? Where are you struggling and how can I help? So we keep it really, really, really simple, where we have much greater impact both for the employee and the manager can be more successful. And again, that what's in it for me, employees who say their manager supports their personal and professional development goals are twice as likely to recommend their manager to others. So it's another one of those heavy hitting needs employees have.
That's so consistent as well with Gallup data over the years.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you mentioned already the NPS scores. Let's touch on that a little bit. I mean, how do you measure manager effectiveness, beyond teams results? How do you do it?
Right. So it's a tough question because I am very wary of organizations putting in a measuring stick without first empowering their managers. So we talk about the two concepts of manager effectiveness and manager empowerment are two different concepts that are linked. We must be empowering, training, developing, supporting our managers to deliver on these. If we are, to the extent that we are as an organization, then absolutely managers then should be measured against those. So, and really the most powerful way to do that is to ask people, right? So make sure you're doing regular engagement surveying. We really are, for a lot of reasons, are proponents of pulse surveying. So 3 to 4 times a year, as opposed to the big annual or biannual engagement surveys, because you need real-time feedback from managers. So if you say, okay, these are the 4 factors we're measuring you against, here are the ways we're going to set you up for success. Now, as that you've had time to really step into that, we're now going to ask your team members, are you getting the coaching you need? Is it meaningful? Are you getting development that makes you feel like you're growing personally and professionally? Are you being recognized for the value you personally bring to the organization, and so on? So, employees, I remind managers, like, they're your measuring stick. And employees may say, well, or managers, sometimes I say, like, okay, but they have all, like, their expectations that are realistic, or so on and so forth. But if managers, again, are holding one-on-ones or they're delivering recognition, they're checking the box, but it's not meaningful, it's not worth it. You're not meeting the need. And so we need to be asking employees if it's really working.
Mm-hmm. Well, as I was thinking back, I'll be the first to admit and point a finger right back at me for vilifying managers and crucifying them at the stake, in a lot of my articles. And sometimes we have to shift and to realize, well, they're human beings, just like you and I are, and they're going to make mistakes. So not all blame should be placed on the manager. I'm sensing now, because so many of them inherit a broken system that isn't invested in their development. So let's talk a little bit about, let's throw some love at the managers. Okay. I mean, maybe Achievers, talk about what Achievers is doing to help managers feel supported.
Yes. And I do think we need to throw love there. I mean, of course, we can all think of managers. I think that we had that where we felt like we as their direct reports were disempowered or not cared for. And that's not, I'm not arguing that is real. What we know, though, is that, it's 99% of managers come to work not wanting to have that impact, not wanting to have a negative impact on their people. It's that as a psychologist, I can assure us all, right? People do not, generally speaking, wake up saying, what can I do to, like, really make these people's lives miserable, or, make them feel unimportant. It's not the case. It's almost always the case that they don't have what they need to deliver a great experience. And then over time, some managers will just self-select out. That's, you hear about, right? We've had a lot of conversation about quiet quitting, or, this, which I see as a sign, it's a canary in the coal mine of, like, okay, what is that manager not getting that they need to deliver the experience? Or have they tried things and they feel like they failed, and so they're, they've just given up? Those happen a lot often. That's human. So to give them love, and what we do at Achievers, when we did this research about manager effectiveness and manager empowerment, this is years ago now, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, when we started this research, it made us realize that we were not empowering our managers. So we developed this great way to measure their effectiveness, but you have to start before that and make sure we're giving them all the tools they need so that they come back and say, yes, you are giving me what I need to deliver these 4 things. Only when we've achieved that do we then start to measure their effectiveness. Because then we can say, okay, here's how to fine tune. Here are some ways that you can improve what you're doing. But if we start measuring effectiveness without empowering, we're really setting ourselves up for failure and disengaged managers.
Yeah, yeah. I love that we're already touching on the solutions piece and how to empower these managers. So let's take a moment to speak to the senior leader or maybe the HR executive about next steps. Okay, so if they have the data and the outlook is not good, what do you propose to end this cycle of manager ineffectiveness?
So first, having a clear and shared understanding of what success looks like. So very clear metrics. We've as we've noted in our report, in our model, we've identified 4 factors that we see as the most impactful on employee and business outcomes. Whatever your measuring stick, though, is at your organization, be very clear on what those are and be clear with managers about how do you know you've been successful. So they have to be measurable in a way that people can evaluate. Am I gaining success or not? 2 then is what we just talked about, which is training. So take those metrics. So we say, these are the metrics, and now we're going to empower you. We're going to train you. We're going to give you what you need. And we're going to ask you how we've done on that. And because some organizations, well-intended, will say, well, we do training your managers. Yes. But then if you survey your managers and say, okay, you had that training, was it helpful? Very often the answer is no. And it doesn't mean HR professionals are not trying hard, but we're oftentimes missing the mark. So you have to ask. The third is making sure that in general, we're supporting manager well-being. So we know that like during the pandemic, managers struggled the most in terms of stress, burnout, mental health challenges, and so on. They were by far and away the most challenged. And so we need to make sure that we're supporting their well-being. Fourth, we need to collect feedback. So we need to ask employees, like we were just talking about, how is this going? Are you getting what you need on these factors that we're measuring? And if the answer is no, then help those managers, fine tune, like I said. And then last, as true for all people, all inside organizations, we need to make sure we're empowering them to progress in their careers as well. So sometimes we can lose sight of that in managers, especially if you've got great managers. I just talked to a CEO yesterday who's like, oh, I really struggle with promoting this person because they're doing such a good job right here. And it's like working. But again, coming back to their own development needs, making sure we're attending to those.
Yeah, it's funny that that's becoming a pattern in this conversation. So we need to tune into that more and more, especially you listeners, because Dr. Natalie keeps coming back to the need for more manager development. Keen insight. Well, unfortunately, this is not a 3-hour podcast, because if it was, we would dissect every survey or every finding from the survey and from that report. So I'll pose you this question. Anything else? Any other surprising things that popped out from the survey that we didn't touch on?
Yeah. So, one of the, for me, one of the main factors was this realizing just how little support managers feel like they're getting in terms of their own development. I think the other finding, so I've spoken to that already, but the other finding that was really notable has to do with gender. So we found, this was a surprising finding. This was one that was not on our radar. Repeatedly throughout our data collection found that women were reporting feeling undervalued, overlooked, and unsupported in the workplace, and finding that challenge in getting past middle management levels in terms of promotion. So men are almost, coming over almost 40% more likely to say they're a manager of managers. So what we're seeing is that, women, these female managers, when they're rising, they're still, they're hitting this glass ceiling in terms of getting promoted beyond middle management. And we also saw, back to the topic of recognition, since we named that that's so important for all of us to receive in order to feel like we're developing. It is the love, like the love potion. And it's the correlations with between recognition, all these great outcomes are so powerful. Well, women are over 50% more likely to say that their manager never recognizes them. So we have to, we're digging into that to understand that better, but it's definitely, we're seeing that female managers are struggling in ways that are even more significant than the general population of managers.
Yeah. And so they need even more support as well. So
exactly.
Wow. Okay. So I have this question because you have been in the middle of so much data for 20 plus years now. And I'm just curious, there's probably lessons that you have learned. What would you say is the greatest one in all your years of pouring over the data? What have you learned?
Jeez, that's a big one, Marcel. So two things come to mind. First, when I think about just people inside organizations, I've been doing this work for about 25 years in the world of organizational culture and the employee experience. And I've been humbled by really understanding more broadly the challenges that we all face in the work world and how isolated people feel. And that's been amplified through the pandemic. But when I say that, I don't mean simply because they're sitting perhaps, at a home office instead of an office building anymore. I mean that we are not connecting in the way that we need to. And if the pandemic taught us anything, it's that we humans, we need connection to thrive. And so we need to be creating connections inside our organizations between managers and employees, from, between one function and another function, up and down in terms of levels. We need the connection, and that people aren't getting it, and it's hurting all of us. And then I'd say the second piece is just that culture is the foundation of organizations. And 25 years ago, when I started this work, we had to do a lot of convincing, particularly of the C-suite, that culture mattered. It's not the case anymore. We don't have those same conversations. However, it does get oftentimes pushed down in the pile on the to-do list because organizations struggle with how to manage it. And I'm here to say, if I leave you with one learning, it's that cultures exist no matter what. They are massively impacting your employee and business performance, whether you know it or not. I can guarantee it, for better or worse. And so actively managing your culture, meaning understanding your core values and integrating them into everything you do, actively managing it is an imperative for every organization that wants to thrive in this new era of work.
Yeah. Well, we have one fun question. It's a soft and fuzzy question. That's tradition on the show. So as we wind down here, I pose you the leadership love question. So I believe that love is the solution to many of today's leadership and business problems. So using your own experiences and what you know from the data, how do we lead our businesses and organizations, especially our employees, with more practical, actionable love day in and day out?
Empowerment. And I know that's what we've been talking about, but I think, I know, Marcel, you and I were chatting about, work life and personal life and where we live. And I see it everywhere that, we as a society have this tendency to look for the villain or the root cause or the, point outside, where, who's creating this discomfort for us. And I think if we come back to love and remembering that we all, I have 3 young daughters, and we have this conversation all the time, they'll come home talking about someone at school who wasn't terribly kind. Doesn't feel good. They're probably struggling in some way. Most people just don't, really love spreading discomfort and hate. There's something beneath that. And so if we take that perspective and we believe that we all really want to do good in the world, we really want to thrive, we really want to nurture and support others, then it changes the whole story, and it changes our energy around how we approach dealing with issues inside the workplace and how we approach supporting people. If we believe everyone's like deep down, everyone wants to thrive and wants to help others thrive, which I really believe to be the case, then it changes our role in how we help make that happen. And I think that's what we all need to do. I think we all have a responsibility to shift to that way of thinking.
I love that. And I love that you said that we can change our story. In other words, we can change the narrative around what's deemed as appropriate or not appropriate in the workplace. For so long, we have compartmentalized our emotions, or we check our emotions at the door, on Monday morning, whereas people long for connection. They want belonging. They want to feel heard. They want to feel loved. And it's truly a human element, and we're diminishing our humanity by not including those very things that we look for in our workspaces.
I couldn't agree more. I love that we're diminishing our humanity. That's right. Right. If we're going to, we've been through a lot as a global society over the past, several years. And, if we can think about connection and belonging as the glue that we all need to thrive in this life, then that will ensure that it will drive our behavior. It does. If we think, okay, that's the ticket. We all want to feel an experience of connection and belonging in our lives, at home, at work, wherever we are. We do. It's what guides us as humans. If we believe that, if we suspend our disbelief and choose to believe that, it will change what we focus on, what we spend our energy on, how we talk to one another. And that's what can change the way that the world works.
Boom. I'm going to call that your mic drop moment right there. Okay. So good. Okay. We bring it home with 2 questions, as we do with every guest. Here it is. Personally, what is really tugging at your heart right now that you'd like us to know?
Yeah, well, I think it's back to this concept of isolation. I have a lot of empathy. I just see us humans really struggling. And I know we've come out of the pandemic, and so there's less focus on this now. Like, during the pandemic, there was a lot of focus on isolation and feeling disconnected and the need to promote mental health. It has not, it hasn't gone away. And I think so we as a society are struggling even more. I mean, I mentioned, I have 3 kids. I see it's rampant among teenagers. It's rampant among children. It's rampant in workplaces. So let's all I just feel this deep sense of responsibility to have empathy and try to reach out to people when you can and create a connection. It only takes a second, right? This is not about heavy lifting, but remember that we are as a society desperate for connection right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been such an impactful conversation. I can't wait to listen to it again. And I know people are going to love it. So let's talk about how people can reach you and find out how they can get to Achievers. Talk about ways for them to connect.
Great. Yes, connection. I love it. Okay, so Marcel asked me to share my website is just www.nataliebaumgartner.com. So please come visit, check it out. And the Achievers Workforce Institute website has tremendous trove of incredible research that our Workforce Institute team has developed and published. I really encourage you to check it out. So achievers.com/workforce-institute. If you just get to achievers.com, and you go to resources, you'll see the link for the Achievers Workforce Institute, and that will take you to the reports. They're all available. We are about spreading the word, spreading the research, helping to inform everyone. So please, there's no strings attached. Go check out those reports, including this manager effectiveness report, and share it widely. And we also do quarterly webinars connected to each of our research reports. So I encourage you to check those out as well. And Marcel, it has always been a great pleasure to get to talk with you more. We've been doing it more through email. It's a great joy to be able to connect with you in person and have this conversation. I really am inspired by what you're doing with Love in Action here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, folks. And I can't speak enough about achievers. And, a 45-minute conversation does not do justice. So as she said, download that report, go to the website, download the manager effectiveness report, because it is chock full of good stuff that is going to help you to design a really good work culture and help your managers be more effective. So yeah, go there now. All right. Yes, we have to do this again. I'm all for it. Every time you pump out one of these reports, you need to come back to the show. That's all I got.
Let's do it. Let's keep nerding out, right? Would love to.
Very good. Well, you can keep the conversation going on social media and with hashtag Love in Action Podcast. And also look for my show notes as well as a YouTube link to this very episode for you to watch. And you can find all that on my website, marcelschwantes.com, including all of the contact info to connect with Achievers and Dr. Natalie. And finally, if you're interested in sponsoring an episode of the show, hey, let's chat. Reach me on my website or find me on LinkedIn.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your business grow.